My name is Melissa, I'm 29, and if there's one truth that defines my life, it's that I've always been the responsible one. The fixer. The problem solver. The person who smooths over every mess and patches every hole. At first, I wore that identity like a badge of honor, thinking it meant I was strong. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being a role and turned into a trap. In my family's eyes, I wasn't a daughter or a sister anymore, I was a wallet. I grew up in rural Texas, in a small town outside Amarillo, where gossip traveled faster than the wind on the plains. Everyone knew who had missed a church service, whose truck was parked outside the wrong house, and whose bills were behind. My parents, Frank and Linda, ran a local feed and supply shop. It kept us afloat, but barely. Money was always tight, and doing without was a phrase I heard more often than bedtime stories. I was the middle child. My brother, Mark, is now 32. He's always had an itch for shortcuts, gambling, half-baked business ventures, quick cash schemes that never lasted. My sister, Emily, 25, was the baby. She was charming, delicate, and always painted as the one who needed looking after. While my parents hovered over Emily and made excuses for Mark, I became the one they never worried about. I was the steady one. The dependable daughter who could take care of herself. That label became a prophecy. I studied hard, avoided trouble, and earned scholarships to the University of Colorado in Denver. My parents bragged about me constantly, "Melissa's the smart one, she'll be fine on her own." And they were right, in a way. I graduated with a business degree, landed a steady job in finance, and carved out a life in the city. A nice apartment, a decent salary, and the beginnings of a future I thought I could be proud of. But independence had a hidden cost. Slowly, without me noticing, my family began leaning on me in ways that went beyond the occasional favor. At first, it was small things. "Sweetheart, can you cover the light bill this month? The store's been slow." Or, "Could you lend Mark a couple $100 until he gets back on his feet?" I told myself it was temporary. Everyone stumbles sometimes. Then the requests grew. When Emily changed her major 3 times and needed an extra semester to graduate, it was my bank account that picked up the tab. When Mark got evicted after losing his job, I wired him nearly $3,000. When my parents maxed out their credit cards, I cut a check to help them reset. Every single time, they swore it was the last. Every single time, they promised to do better. It never was the last. And I kept saying yes. Because I loved them. Because I thought that's what good daughters did. Because when my mom would murmur, "God blessed you so you could bless us," the guilt settled in my stomach like a stone. Years blurred together in a cycle of late-night phone calls, emergency transfers, and broken promises. If I added it all up, the tuition, the rent bailouts, the store debts, I could have had a down payment on my own home by now. Instead, I had a dwindling savings account and a family who saw me as their permanent safety net. For the longest time, I refused to see the truth. I told myself I was just being a good sister, a good daughter. That this was what family did. It wasn't until I met Daniel that cracks began to form in the story I'd built around my own servitude. Daniel came into my life when I was 27. We met volunteering at a food drive downtown. He was quiet, kind, steady in a way that made me feel safe. Unlike my family, he asked about my day and actually listened. He noticed things I brushed off. Like how my phone only seemed to ring when someone back home needed money. One night, after I hung up from a long call with my mom, which ended, predictably, with me agreeing to send money for Emily's car insurance, Daniel tilted his head and asked, "Do they ever call you just to talk? Or is it always like that?" I laughed nervously. "They're just in a rough spot." He frowned. "Melissa, they've been in a rough spot the entire time I've known you." That comment stuck with me, small and sharp, like a burr caught in my sweater. I tried to shake it off, but it wouldn't go away. By last summer, the pattern had become impossible to deny. I'd bailed Mark out 3 separate times, only to later find out at least one emergency was the result of him blowing money at a poker night. Emily had asked me to co-sign a lease for a trendy loft in Dallas she couldn't afford. My parents wanted help with medical bills, repairs for the shop, even their property taxes. No matter how much I sent, the requests never stopped. I started looking at spreadsheets, not just for my clients, but for myself. The numbers told the story more clearly than I wanted to admit. Thousands gone. My savings drained. My own goals pushed further and further out of reach. Still, when I tried to imagine saying no, my chest tightened with guilt. Family helps family, my dad always said. You know we'd do the same for you. The thing was, I couldn't recall a single time they actually had. And yet, I stayed in the role. The dependable one. The one who didn't need help. The one who could always be counted on to step in. Daniel started asking tougher questions, ones I didn't have answers for. When do you get to start your own life? When do your dreams matter as much as theirs? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't shake the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change. That maybe one day, they'd see me as more than a walking bank account. And when my dad's 50th birthday rolled around, a milestone, a celebration half the town was buzzing about, I let myself believe this might be the moment. That they'd finally remember I was part of the family, not just the one funding it. I was wrong. When Daniel and I started dating, I thought I was simply lucky to have found someone dependable. What I didn't expect was how quickly he'd become a mirror, reflecting back the patterns I had spent years avoiding. Daniel was nothing like my brother or my father. He didn't swagger into a room or fill silences with grand stories. He was steady, measured, and attentive in ways that felt almost foreign to me. He remembered little details from our conversations, asked about my day, and genuinely listened. For someone used to being taken for granted, it was disarming. Early in our relationship, I tried to keep the messy parts of my family life out of sight. It wasn't shame exactly, it was habit. I was so used to carrying those burdens alone that sharing them felt unnatural. But Daniel noticed things anyway. One evening we were cooking dinner in my apartment when my phone buzzed for the third time in an hour. It was Mom again. I sighed and silenced the call, stirring the pot of pasta sauce. Do you need to get that? Daniel asked gently. It's nothing urgent, I muttered. But the truth was, I already knew what she wanted. The store's rent was probably overdue, or Emily's tuition installment had come up again. Later that night, I caved and called her back. Sure enough, the conversation was 40 minutes of financial worry that ended with me promising to wire over $500. When I hung up, Daniel gave me a long look. Do they ever just call to see how you're doing? He asked quietly. I forced a laugh. They're just under a lot of pressure. It'll get better once the store picks up. He shook his head slowly. Melissa. I've known you nearly a year. In that time, I've never heard you take a call from them that didn't end with you sending money. That's not normal. His words lodged deep inside me. I wanted to argue, to defend them, to say this was just how families worked. But a voice inside whispered what I didn't want to admit, he was right. The weeks that followed only reinforced his observation. Mark called me in a panic one Friday night, claiming his car had broken down on the highway. I transferred him $800 for repairs. 2 weeks later, I found out from a mutual acquaintance that the money had gone straight into another poker game. Emily, meanwhile, had signed a lease for an upscale loft in Dallas she couldn't afford. She called me crying about late fees and begged me to co-sign so she wouldn't lose the place. Against every shred of common sense, I considered it, until Daniel sat me down at my kitchen table with a calculator and a notepad. Look at this, he said, sketching out numbers. If you co-sign and she defaults, you're legally responsible. Do you realize what that could do to your credit? To your plans? I bit my lip, staring at the neat columns of figures. She promised she'll keep up with payments. He arched a brow. Like Mark promised he'd pay you back last time? Like your parents promised the store would finally turn a profit after your last loan? I didn't have an answer. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm not saying cut them off cold. But you need to think about your future too. You can't keep being everyone else's safety net forever. His words scared me, not because they were harsh, but because they echoed the thoughts I had been pushing away. What future was I building for myself if every dollar, every ounce of energy, was redirected back to Amarillo? By last summer, the weight was unbearable. My spreadsheets, once neat and comforting, had become proof of my own entrapment. Transfers to Mark. Checks to Emily's university. Payments for my parents' mounting debts. The numbers glared back at me, undeniable. I remember sitting on my couch late one night, staring at my dwindling savings account. If I had all that money back, I could have put a down payment on a house. I could have started the business I'd been dreaming of. I could have invested in myself instead of pouring it into a black hole of bad choices. And yet, the guilt never loosened its grip. Every time I tried to picture saying no, I heard my father's voice, "Family helps family. You know we'd do the same for you." But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. They never had. Daniel, patient as ever, tried a different approach. One night over takeout, he asked, "When was the last time they did something just for you? A birthday gift, a call that wasn't about money, even a thank you?" I searched my memory, combing through years of birthdays, holidays, and late-night calls. Nothing came. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. "I don't know," I whispered. Daniel's expression softened, but his grip on my hand tightened. "Then maybe it's time to start asking yourself why." I didn't have an answer. But for the first time, the cracks in my carefully constructed loyalty started to show. Still, I clung to one hope, my father's upcoming 50th birthday. A milestone, a grand celebration everyone in town seemed to know about. I bought gifts, made travel plans, and told myself this time would be different. Surely they wouldn't forget me when it mattered most. Surely I'd finally be included not as their purse, but as their daughter. Surely. By the time spring rolled around, the whole town was buzzing about my father's upcoming birthday. Turning 50 wasn't just another year, it was a milestone. A celebration. Half the county seemed to have been invited. Old friends, cousins, neighbors, business acquaintances, everyone knew it was going to be the event of the season. And despite everything, I let myself believe that this time would be different. I threw myself into preparations the way I always did, wholeheartedly, with hope outweighing reason. I picked out a thoughtful gift, a leather-bound journal I knew Dad would love, paired with a vintage fountain pen. I even booked a room at a small boutique hotel in Amarillo so Daniel and I could have a place of our own while visiting. Daniel teased me gently about my enthusiasm. "You've gone all out," he said one evening as I wrapped the journal in crisp navy paper. I smiled, trying to mask the knot of anxiety in my chest. It's his 50th. It's important. Maybe this time they'll see me as more than the one who wires money when things go wrong. He didn't say anything, but his expression told me he wasn't convinced. As the date drew closer, I noticed subtle cracks in the facade. Mom's texts about the party were vague, non-committal. "We're still working out the guest list. It's shaping up nicely, don't worry." Mark dodged the subject altogether, changing topics whenever I asked. Emily went radio silent. I told myself I was overthinking it. Surely they wouldn't leave me out. Not me. Not their daughter who had been there for them time and time again. Still, the silence gnawed at me. One evening, Daniel found me pacing the living room, scrolling through my phone with furrowed brows. "What's wrong?" he asked. I don't have a single detail about the party. No time, no place, no schedule. Just vague promises that I'll be filled in soon. It's strange, right? Daniel set down his coffee and met my gaze. "Melissa, do you trust them to include you?" The question landed like a stone. Did I? I wanted to. Desperately. But the truth bubbled beneath the surface, I wasn't sure. On the Friday before the birthday, I called Mom again, pressing for details. She sounded distracted, rushed. "Oh honey, it's just a simple get-together. Don't stress yourself. We'll let you know if we really need you there. If we really need you there." I hung up, my hands shaking. Daniel tried to comfort me, but I brushed it off. "It's nothing. I'll hear from them tomorrow. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. That Saturday morning, I woke to a flood of notifications. At first, I thought it was my phone glitching. Then I opened Instagram. Photo after photo filled my feed, my parents' backyard decked out in balloons and banners. A cake so large it could have fed 100 people. Tables groaning under the weight of catered food. Smiling relatives raising glasses. Friends clinking beer bottles. And at the center of it all, my father beaming, surrounded by Mark, Emily, Mom, and dozens of others. Everyone. Except me. The journal I had bought him sat unopened on my dresser. My hotel reservation confirmation blinked from my email inbox. My heart sank into my stomach. I kept scrolling, desperate for some mistake, some sign that maybe this was just a pre-party, a smaller gathering before the real celebration that I would be part of. But the captions told a different story. What an unforgettable night. Happy 50th, Frank. Best party ever. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Daniel came into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. One look at my face and he froze. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. They didn't even invite me. He sat down beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as tears welled in my eyes. "Melissa. I'm so sorry." I shook my head, staring blankly at the screen. "I don't understand. I've given them everything. Paid their bills, covered their mistakes, been there every single time they needed me. And they couldn't even bother to invite me to his birthday?" Daniel's jaw tightened. This wasn't an accident. They chose to do this. The words pierced through the fog. He was right. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a choice. A deliberate erasure. I sat in silence for a long time, the images from social media burning into my mind. My father's smile. Emily's champagne glass raised high. Mark's arms slung around Dad's shoulders. All of them laughing, celebrating, while I sat miles away with nothing but an unopened gift and a hollow ache in my chest. For the first time in years, the truth was undeniable. I wasn't family to them. Not really. I was a resource. A backup plan. A convenient safety net. But when it came to moments of joy, I was expendable. And in that moment, something inside me began to fracture. The rest of that weekend felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Everywhere I turned, Instagram, Facebook, even a local Amarillo community page, photos of the party kept popping up. My dad laughing with his buddies, Emily posing in her glittery dress, Mark belting out karaoke in front of a rented machine. The captions stung even more than the images. What a beautiful night with family. Couldn't imagine celebrating without everyone here. The irony made my stomach twist. Everyone, except me. By Sunday, I was hollow. I sat on my couch, still in pajamas, my phone heavy in my hand. I must have opened and closed Mom's contact a dozen times, my thumb hovering over the call button. Every instinct screamed at me to demand answers, but a darker, quieter voice whispered, "They've already given you their answer." Daniel finally broke the silence. He had been giving me space, moving around the apartment quietly, checking on me with gentle touches and cups of tea. But now he sat across from me, his expression firm. "Melissa, you need to talk to them. You deserve to know why." I shook my head. I already know why. They didn't want me there. They didn't want me, just my money. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe. But you can't keep carrying this in silence. Call them. Get it out in the open. The thought made my pulse race, but I nodded. He was right. I couldn't just sit here drowning in unanswered questions. With trembling fingers, I dialed Mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and casual, as though nothing had happened. "Hi, honey. How are you?" I swallowed hard. "How am I?" "Mom, what was that? Why wasn't I invited to Dad's party?" A pause. Then a sigh. "Melissa, we just thought it would be too much for you. You're so busy with your job in Denver, and with Daniel, and we didn't want you to feel obligated." Too much for me. I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom, I wanted to be there. I bought a gift. I booked a hotel. You knew I was planning on coming." Her tone sharpened, tinged with annoyance. "Honey, don't make this about you. It was your father's special night. We didn't want any tension." Tension. The word hit me like a slap. Was I the tension? The outsider who spoiled the perfect family picture? I choked back tears. "So you celebrated with everyone else and didn't even think I'd notice?" She huffed, as though I was being unreasonable. "Melissa, please don't start. It was just a party. Just a party." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands shook as I set the phone on the table. Daniel reached for me, but I pulled away, pacing the room. "They didn't even try to hide it," I muttered. "They didn't care if I saw the pictures. They wanted me to see." The realization burned hotter the longer I sat with it. Excluding me wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate. A message, loud and clear: "You don't belong here." That night, I scrolled through the photos again, studying the faces. My father's wide grin. Emily's smug smile. Mark throwing back shots with his friends. They weren't sorry. They weren't even conflicted. They were proud. For years, I had been the invisible scaffolding holding them up. The one wiring money at midnight, the one co-signing, the one bailing them out of every reckless decision. And when it came to celebrating life's milestones, I wasn't even considered part of the picture. Daniel sat beside me, his voice low but steady. "Melissa, you need to see this for what it is. This isn't love. This isn't family. This is them showing you exactly how little you mean outside of your bank account." I wanted to argue. To defend them. To cling to the idea that somewhere, under all the dysfunction, they loved me. But the photos told the truth. And the truth was devastating. I stayed awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last decade in my head. Every transfer. Every sacrifice. Every excuse I had made for them. And for what? To be erased from the one celebration that should have united us? By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but the anger was still sharp. I knew one thing: this wasn't the end. Something worse was coming. I just didn't realize how soon it would arrive. The Monday after Dad's party, I woke up groggy, my body heavy from another sleepless night. I dragged myself to the kitchen, hoping coffee would dull the ache in my chest. That's when I saw it, an email notification blinking on my phone. The subject line made my stomach drop: "Urgent, need help." It was from my father. I opened it, half hoping for some kind of apology. Instead, the words on the screen twisted my gut tighter than anything I had felt all weekend. "Melissa, we need you to send $23,000 immediately. Mark has gotten into some trouble with his gambling again, and we've had to cover part of it. The balance is due by the end of the week. We know you're doing well in Denver and can afford this. Please don't let us down. Dad. No, sorry for excluding you. No, wish you'd been at the party. Just a bill. A demand." I read it again, disbelief thick in my throat. $23,000. The same man who hadn't thought I was worth a seat at his birthday table thought nothing of asking me to cover my brother's reckless bets. Daniel found me frozen at the counter, phone in hand. "What is it?" I handed it to him wordlessly. He read the message, his face hardening with every line. Are you kidding me? Melissa, this is insane. I swallowed. It's like I don't even exist to them, except as a bank account. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. You can't give them this. Not this time. But the guilt came rushing in like a tidal wave. My father's voice echoed in my head, don't let us down. For the rest of the morning, I paced the apartment, torn between rage and obligation. Finally, I called Dad. He answered on the second ring, his tone brisk, businesslike. Melissa. Did you get my email? I did, I said, my voice shaking. Dad, do you even hear yourself? You didn't invite me to your party, and now you're asking me for $23,000? He sighed, like I was being difficult. Melissa, don't be dramatic. The party was separate. This is about family responsibility. Mark's in a bad spot, and we all have to pitch in. All? Or just me? I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one ever pitching in. Silence. Then his voice turned cold. Melissa, you're the one with the good job, the one who can afford it. You know your brother isn't capable. And your mother and I are stretched thin keeping the store afloat. This is your duty. Duty. The word burned. I'm not an ATM, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. Dad's voice hardened further. Stop being selfish. If you love this family, you'll do what needs to be done. We'll expect the transfer by Friday. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, numb. Later that day, Mark called, his voice dripping with false charm. Hey sis. Look, I know Dad probably told you about the money. It's just a temporary thing. I'll pay you back once I get back on my feet. I laughed bitterly. Like the last 5 times you promised that? His tone snapped. Don't be like that, Melissa. You know I've had bad luck. You've always been there for me before, why stop now? Because it's $23,000, Mark. Do you even realize what you're asking? It's not that much for you, he muttered. You live in Denver, you make good money. It's pocket change. Pocket change. I hung up on him. That evening, Emily chimed in with a text, don't be cruel, Melissa. You know Mark struggles. You're supposed to help. That's what family is for. Family. That word again, twisted into a weapon. By nightfall, I felt like I was suffocating. Everywhere I turned, someone was reminding me that my worth began and ended with my bank balance. I couldn't escape it. And then, as if to twist the knife, a neighbor from Amarillo messaged me. Mrs. Cooper, who had known our family for decades, wrote, I was sorry not to see you at the party. People were talking, saying you've done well for yourself, and that's why your folks lean on you. They even joked you're basically the family's retirement plan. Retirement plan. ATM, wallet. Purse. Every label except the one that mattered, daughter. I dropped my phone onto the couch, pressing my palms to my eyes. Daniel sat beside me, his voice low. Melissa, how much more proof do you need? They don't see you as family. They see you as a resource. His words cut deep because they were true. $23,000. An entire savings cushion. The price of a brand new car. The dream of a down payment on my own home, gone in a click. And they expected me to hand it over without hesitation. For years, I had told myself that helping them was love. That sacrificing my future was what good daughters did. But now, staring at that email, hearing their words echo in my mind, I felt the first stirrings of something stronger than guilt. Anger. And underneath it, a single, dangerous thought, maybe this time, I don't give in. For days after the $23,000 demand, I felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't concentrate at work, my hands trembled every time my phone buzzed, and at night I lay awake replaying the same conversations in my head. My father's cold voice. Mark's casual entitlement. Emily's guilt-tripping text. Every word reinforced the same message: you owe us. You exist to fix our mistakes. That is your role. By Thursday, I was drowning. Daniel found me sitting at the dining table surrounded by bills and old bank statements, my laptop open to a half-written transfer screen. Tears blurred the numbers on the page. "Melissa," he said softly, sitting down across from me. "Are you really going to send it?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I don't know. If I don't, they'll never forgive me." "Melissa," his voice was firm now. "They already don't value you. Forgiveness doesn't enter into it. They excluded you from your own father's birthday. And now, the only time they reach out is with their hands open. That's not forgiveness. That's control." His words hit me like a blow. I slumped back in my chair, my body heavy with exhaustion. Then what do I do? If I don't send it, they'll call me selfish. Cold. They'll say I abandoned them. "They already call you selfish the second you hesitate," Daniel said. "Don't you see? It doesn't matter how much you give, they'll always demand more. The only way this ends is if you stop playing the role they've written for you. Stop playing the role." The phrase echoed in my mind. That night, I booked an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Patel. She had been helping me untangle years of guilt and obligation, but even she hadn't seen me this raw. I spilled everything: the birthday exclusion, the $23,000 bill, the conversations that made me feel like a walking bank. She listened quietly, her gaze steady. Then she said something that chilled me to the bone. "Melissa, what you're describing isn't just family support. It's financial abuse. They have conditioned you to believe that your love equals money, and that without it, you have no worth. Financial abuse." The words landed like a truth I'd always known but never dared to name. I pressed my hands to my eyes, fighting back tears. "So what do I do? How do I stop?" "You set a boundary," she said firmly. "Not a suggestion, not a compromise, a line they cannot cross. And you hold it, no matter how much they push back. That's the only way this cycle ends." I walked out of her office lighter and heavier all at once. Terrified, but also determined. For the first time in years, I felt like I had permission to say no. That evening, I opened my laptop and began to type. The email flowed out of me in one long rush. "Dad, Mom, Mark, and Emily. I've thought long and hard about the request you sent me this week. After years of sending money, covering bills, and putting my own future on hold, I've realized this isn't sustainable. I will not be sending the $23,000. I will not be sending any more money at all. I am done being the family's emergency fund. I love you, but love cannot be measured in dollar amounts. From this point forward, I will not finance anyone's debts, mistakes, or bills. Consider this my final word on the matter. Melissa." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. Then, with a deep breath, I hit send. But I didn't stop there. A strange calm came over me as I logged into my banking app. I selected each of their accounts, Mom's, Dad's, Mark's, and Emily's, and transferred exactly $10 to each. In the memo line, I typed, "This is all you get from me now." It was petty. Symbolic. But it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't seen in years. When the last transfer was complete, I closed my laptop and sat back. My body shook, adrenaline coursing through me, but underneath it all was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The first response came within minutes. "Mark, what the hell is this? $10? Are you mocking me?" Then Emily, "Wow. Cruel. Heartless. Guess money made you forget what family means." An hour later, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was dripping with wounded indignation. "Melissa, how could you do this to us? After everything we've sacrificed for you? We raised you, gave you everything we had, and now when we need you, you turn your back. Sacrificed for me? The words made me laugh bitterly. Finally, my father's email landed in my inbox. Melissa. I don't know what kind of phase you're going through, but this behavior is disgraceful. You are shaming this family. If you don't correct this immediately, don't bother coming home. Dad. I read it twice, then shut my laptop. For years, those words, "don't bother coming home," would have gutted me. But now, I realized something startling. Maybe that wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was freedom. The morning after I sent the $10 transfers, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Call after call, text after text, voicemail after voicemail. Each notification was another punch of dread in my stomach. By noon, I had stopped checking them one by one and just watched the unread count climb higher. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the first voicemail, from Mom. Her voice was shrill, wounded. Melissa, this is shameful. We raised you better than this. Do you realize what people will think when they hear you abandoned your family over money? This isn't who you are. I deleted it before she finished. The next was from Emily. Wow, Melissa. $10? Really? That's sick. You think you're proving a point, but all you're doing is showing what a cold, selfish person you've become. Don't bother reaching out to me again. Then Mark, you've officially lost it. I've defended you for years, told people you weren't stuck up just because you live in Denver. But this? Sending me $10 as some kind of joke. You're disgusting. You'll regret this. Finally, Dad's message. His tone wasn't angry, it was icy, controlled. That made it worse. Melissa, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this rebellion ends now. You will apologize, and you will send the money. If you don't, you're no longer my daughter. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hand. Daniel came into the room, saw my face, and gently took the phone away. You don't have to listen to any more of that. I buried my face in my hands. They hate me. My own family hates me. He knelt beside me, his voice steady. They don't hate you. They hate losing control over you. That's different. His words sank deep. For years, I had been their safety net, their fixer, their bailout. Of course they were furious now. They weren't just losing money, they were losing the grip they had on me. The following days were a storm. Extended relatives began chiming in, as if my parents had sent out a rallying cry. My aunt left a long voicemail about how family always comes first, and how disappointed she was in me. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years texted, "You've changed." Not for the better. Even an old family friend messaged me on Facebook, "Your parents are heartbroken. You need to make this right." It was relentless. Each accusation clawed at the guilt I thought I had buried. I questioned myself constantly. Was I selfish? Was I cruel? Was I betraying the very people who raised me? But then I'd remember the email. The $23,000 demand, written as if I were their employee, not their daughter. The way they'd laughed and celebrated at Dad's birthday while pretending I didn't exist. And the guilt would loosen its grip, just a little. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. I cried in the shower so Daniel wouldn't hear. I stared blankly at spreadsheets at work, unable to focus. At night, I tossed and turned, my dreams filled with angry voices calling me ungrateful, selfish, heartless. Dr. Patel helped me reframe it. In our next session, she said, "Melissa, what you're experiencing is withdrawal. Not from a substance, but from a role you've been conditioned to fill your whole life. They're addicted to your compliance, and now they're in withdrawal too. That's why it feels unbearable. But it will pass." I clung to her words like a lifeline. Daniel, steady as ever, became my anchor. When the texts came in waves, he'd take my phone and silence it. When I crumbled, he'd hold me until the storm passed. One night, after I broke down saying I felt like the worst daughter alive, he cupped my face in his hands and said, "Melissa, good daughters don't go bankrupt keeping everyone else afloat. Good daughters know their worth." Something about the way he said it made my chest ache. By the end of that week, I realized something startling. The more they pushed, the stronger I became. Each cruel message confirmed I had been right to draw the line. Each angry voicemail was proof of how toxic the dynamic really was. One evening, after silencing yet another round of calls, I sat at the kitchen table with Daniel and whispered, "I don't think I've ever felt this hated in my life. But I also don't think I've ever felt this free." He smiled softly. "That's because for the first time, you're living for yourself." I thought about that long after he went to bed. It was true. I was raw, exhausted, and bruised by the fallout. But beneath it all was a new strength I didn't recognize yet, something I had never felt before. And even though I didn't know what would come next, I knew one thing for certain: I could never go back. A few weeks passed before the first silence broke. After the initial storm of calls, texts, and guilt-tripping, the flood slowed to a trickle. Mom still sent occasional dramatic messages. "We miss you but can't believe you'd hurt us like this." And Emily posted thinly veiled jabs on social media about selfish siblings who forget where they came from. But the screaming frenzy had dulled. I had almost grown used to the quiet when, one Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but didn't expect: Mark. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Part of me wanted nothing to do with him ever again. But another part, the one that still ached for some piece of my family to be real, pressed accept. "Melissa?" His voice was quieter than I remembered, stripped of the usual bravado. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, bracing myself for another tirade. I owe you an apology," he said. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Mark, the eternal excuse maker, the gambler, the golden boy who always landed on his feet, apologizing? He cleared his throat. "I know I've screwed up. More times than I can count. And I've leaned on you because it was easy. Too easy. You always came through. And I told myself it was no big deal because you could afford it. But that was me justifying being a leech." The bluntness made my chest tighten. "I'm not saying this because Dad told me to, or Mom, or anyone," he continued. "I've been thinking. I keep telling myself I'm unlucky, that I just need one more break. But maybe the truth is, I've been spoiled. I've never faced consequences because you always cushioned the fall." I sat down, my legs weak. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you cut me off," he admitted. At first, I was furious. But then I realized, you were right. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep dragging you down with me. So I'm going to try something different." "What does that mean?" I asked, wary. "It means I started going to Gamblers Anonymous. Twice a week. And I got a second job at the warehouse. It's crap work, but it's honest. I'm putting together a plan to start paying you back. Little by little. It's going to take a while, but I need to do it. Not just for you, for me." Tears pricked my eyes. For the first time in years, my brother wasn't asking me for something. He was offering something back. "Mark," my voice cracked. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," he said quickly. "I know I've burned a lot of bridges. But I wanted you to know I see it now. You were right to cut us off. And I'm sorry it took me this long to get it." We ended the call on a tentative note. My heart was a mix of emotions: cautious hope, lingering doubt, a fragile sense of relief. When I told Daniel later that night, he studied my face carefully. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to. Part of me is terrified to." Daniel nodded. "Then don't decide yet. Let his actions speak for themselves." And so, I waited. 2 weeks later, a check arrived in the mail. It was only for $50, the memo line scrawled, "First step." It wasn't about the amount. It was about the gesture. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that check, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in years when it came to my family, hope. Mark kept calling every so often, not to ask for money, but to update me. He talked about meetings, about work, about how hard it was to unlearn old habits. He didn't ask for sympathy, just shared his struggles plainly. It was strange, almost unsettling, to hear my brother without the layers of excuses and bravado. Like I was finally speaking to the real Mark, not the version who lived off borrowed money and broken promises. Emily, meanwhile, was furious. She texted me once after spotting me in a group photo with Daniel's friends. "So you have time for strangers but not your family?" I didn't bother responding. Mom continued her guilt campaign, alternating between icy silence and melodramatic voicemails about how things will never be the same until you do the right thing. Dad stayed cold, formal, treating me like a business partner who had defaulted on a contract. But Mark's crack in the wall, small, fragile, imperfect, was enough to shift something inside me. For the first time, I saw that maybe change was possible. Maybe not with all of them, but at least with one. That was enough to keep me going. Mark's apology lingered in my mind long after our call. His voice had been shaky, unsure, but real. And when that $50 check arrived, a laughably small dent in the thousands he owed, I couldn't stop staring at it. Not because of the money, but because it represented something I had given up on a long time ago: accountability. For the first time, one member of my family was willing to face the truth. It gave me the courage to at least consider reconnecting with the others. Not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. On my terms. So when my parents called a few weeks later and asked to meet privately, I surprised myself by saying yes. We agreed on neutral ground, a diner off the interstate, halfway between Amarillo and where I lived in Denver. Daniel offered to come, but I told him I needed to do this alone. Walking into that diner felt like stepping into a storm I wasn't sure I could weather. My parents were already seated in a booth, Mom fiddling with her napkin, Dad staring out the window with that same stoic expression I'd known my whole life. When they saw me, Mom's face lit up with forced cheer. "Melissa, sweetheart. You look good." I slid into the booth, my stomach knotted. "Let's just talk." The first few minutes were stilted, filled with small talk about the weather and work. Then Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to say," he paused, glancing at Mom. "We made a mistake. Leaving you out of the party, it was wrong. We shouldn't have done that." The words hung in the air, stiff and awkward. Mom jumped in quickly. We thought it would be easier without tension. But we see now that it hurt you. And that wasn't fair. It wasn't much. It wasn't an outpouring of remorse. But it was something." I nodded slowly. "You're right. It did hurt. More than you realize." I felt erased. Silence. Then Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling. "We don't want to lose you, Melissa. We need to find a way forward." I pulled in a shaky breath. A way forward means boundaries. No more money. No more guilt trips. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be about more than my bank account. Dad's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. Understood. It wasn't convincing, but it was the first time I'd ever heard him agree to limits. A week later, Easter rolled around. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend the family gathering. Daniel came with me, his steady presence a lifeline. Walking into my parents' house felt surreal. The same old furniture, the same photos on the walls, but the air was different, heavier. Mark greeted me first, pulling me into a tentative hug. "Glad you came," he murmured. His sincerity steadied me. Mom fussed over us, offering food and trying too hard to act normal. Dad was reserved but polite, keeping conversation surface level. And then there was Emily. She cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my glass of water, her eyes flashing. "So you think you're better than us now? Too good to help your own family?" I set the pitcher down slowly. I think I finally realized helping doesn't mean sacrificing myself. Her lip curled. You've changed. And not in a good way. I held her gaze, my voice firm. You're right. I have changed. And I'm not going back. Her face twisted, and she stormed out of the room. The rest of the evening was tense but manageable. Mark stayed close, making conversation about his new job. Dad mostly avoided direct topics, which was fine by me. Mom hovered anxiously, as though afraid the whole fragile arrangement might collapse at any second. When Daniel and I finally left, I felt drained but also oddly proud. For the first time, I had walked into that house with boundaries, and left without caving. It wasn't perfect. Emily was still furious, Dad still stiff, Mom still manipulative in small ways. But there was progress. A fragile, tentative step towards something healthier. On the drive back, Daniel squeezed my hand. How do you feel? I stared out the window, the Texas plains rolling by. Like it's not fixed. Maybe it never will be. But for the first time, I feel like I'm not the only one carrying the weight anymore. 6 months later, my life looks nothing like it used to. My savings account, once bled dry by endless transfers, has begun to grow again. It feels strange, almost luxurious, to watch the numbers tick upward without the constant fear of another emergency draining it. I finally set aside money for something I've dreamed about for years, a down payment on a home of my own. Work has flourished too. With my focus no longer scattered by midnight panic calls and surprise bills, I've poured myself into projects I care about. Last month, I earned a promotion, senior consultant. My boss told me I've stepped into my power. The words made me smile because they're true, in more ways than one. Daniel and I are stronger than ever. We moved in together, and our little apartment feels like a sanctuary, warm, quiet, and free of the tension that used to hang over me like a storm cloud. On weekends, we volunteer at the same food bank where we first met. This time, though, I show up without the weight of family demands gnawing at me. I give because I want to, not because I'm being drained dry. As for my family, things are complicated. Mark continues to surprise me. Every month, a small check arrives in the mail. Sometimes it's $50, sometimes $100. Always with the words "step by step" in the memo line. He's not magically healed, but he's trying. And for once, I believe him. Mom and Dad tread carefully now. They call every so often, and though the conversations are still shallow, they've stopped asking for money. I suspect they're still angry, still nursing the idea that I betrayed them. But they've learned the boundary is real. Emily? She hasn't spoken to me since Easter. She posts vague rants online about selfish people who forget family. Maybe she'll come around someday. Maybe she won't. I've stopped waiting. Because here's the truth I've learned, my worth isn't tied to their approval. For nearly 3 decades, I lived as their safety net, their fixer, their purse. I measured my love in dollars and my value in sacrifices. But the moment I said no, the moment I finally broke the cycle, I began to see myself clearly for the first time. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a crutch. I'm not the dependable one who silently absorbs every mistake. I'm Melissa. A woman with dreams, with strength, with the right to choose herself. And if that makes me selfish in their eyes, so be it. Because I've never felt freer. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If it connected with you in any way, hit the like button, it really helps. And if you want more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe. I'd also love to hear your thoughts down in the comments.